Catholic priests prayed over a screaming, cursing boy. A boy they believed was possessed by the devil. The boy's ordeal inspired a movie so frightening that paramedics and ambulances stood by at theaters to deal with cases of hysteria.
The Exorcist.
The movie was a fiction, but our story is true. It's based on long-lost journals and the memories of an old priest who was there. The Exorcist hit the big screen in 1973.
Something beyond comprehension is happening to a little girl on this street, in this house. A man has been sent for, as a last resort, to try and save her.
People lined up around the block to see it, and threw up and fainted in the cinemas. They rushed back to religion. Catholic churches reported a sudden run on the confessional. People wanted forgiveness for their sins. Author William Peter Blatty, writer of the movie and the novel on which it was based, was astonished by the reaction.
Suddenly it occurred to those of faith, weak or strong, that, you know, there might be demons, there might be punishment.
His story about a priest who drives Satan from a malevolent child was inspired by a real exorcism that took place in 1949. The exorcist was a 52-year-old Roman Catholic priest in St. Louis, Missouri. Father William Bowden was respected for his kindness and charity. Over 25 years in the priesthood, he also earned a reputation for tenacity.
He was kind of like a bulldog. If he'd get a hold of something, he'd follow it to the very end.
He received a call from Raymond Bishop, a fellow priest. Father Bishop related a story that seemed preposterous. A woman suspected that something evil had taken control of her teenage son. Could Bowden, with his experience and Jesuit education, do something to help? Instead of dismissing the woman as a crank, Father Bowden visited the family.
He's not himself. But the doctor said nothing's wrong.
The distraught parents told him about their troubled son, Richard.
Thank you for coming, Father.
Tell me about Richard.
Things are happening to him. Things we don't understand. I'm frightened.
Bowden calmly took her back to the beginning. The mother described an ordinary, happy, close-knit family. Richard, an only child, was never any trouble.
My sister-in-law Millie came for a visit in January. She and Richard were always very close.
Let me show you how to use the Ouija board. Okay. Put your hand.
She brought him one of those talking boards, a Ouija board.
Let the spirits move it. Like this? That's right.
Millie and Richard spent hours playing with it, trying to make contact with spirits in the beyond.
Spiritualism is essentially the belief that not only when we die does the soul go on to some kind of afterlife existence, but that it's possible for communication to take place between the living and the dead.
On January the 15th, the first mysterious sign appeared, a steady, dripping sound.
It came and went every night for 7 or 8 nights.
There were no leaky taps. The family was baffled. On January the 26th, the family learned Millie had suddenly died.
She wasn't sick. We didn't expect it. Richard was devastated. It was the first time someone close to him had died.
In the days that followed, the nighttime thumps and tappings increased.
It's upstairs.
Again.
Better go see.
They suspected mice, but an exterminator found nothing. They wondered about the paranormal. Was this the work of poltergeists, the noisy ghosts of legend and folklore?
The thought crossed my mind that it was Millie, the spiritualist, trying to make contact from beyond. One night, a holy picture rattled on the wall as if it was being thumped from behind. It wasn't Richard playing a prank. He was in bed.
It starts off with lots of phenomena which are interpreted in terms of possibly poltergeist activity. So it's alleged that objects are thrown around the room or fly around the room. It's claimed that there are mysterious sounds which people can't explain.
This unsettling and surreal activity suddenly took a frightening turn.
Mom! Oh my God! Richard! William!
Good morning, class. Good morning, Miss Johnson.
At school, Richard, a normally quiet student, became the weirdest boy in the class.
Sit still.
I'm not doing it.
Richard, can you please?
Thank you, Richard.
We took him to the doctor. He couldn't find anything wrong. He said Richard was just high-strung.
That is a term, that we still use today, but it doesn't connote good mental health. It indicates someone who has anxiety, maybe depression, but certainly irritability and anxiety.
I'm going to read you a list of words, and I want
The parents turned to a psychiatrist.
Okay? Fork, spoon,
He gave Richard
7,
all kinds of tests,
cat,
but he couldn't find any kind of mental
baseball,
problem.
Kentucky.
We even saw a psychiatrist.
To Father Bowden, it looked like a normal case of a rambunctious boy going through puberty.
But it's not just him. We all saw it. Then the marks started coming on his body.
Mom!
What is it? Let me see.
It began on February the 26th, a month after Millie's death.
We tried to contact Millie on the Ouija board. It says yes.
The whole family accepted this belief, and no doubt when the aunt actually passed on, they were expecting some kind of communication from beyond the grave.
If you're Millie, prove it.
There was a response. Not on the Ouija board, but again on Richard's body.
Oh, Richard, not again.
Richard's desperate parents began to consider the unthinkable. Perhaps their son was in the grip of something demonic. They turned to their pastor, a Lutheran.
Psychiatry and science and medicine could not give them the answers they were looking for, and it didn't change Richard's behavior one iota. So they abandoned science because science couldn't help them at that time.
Our Father, who art in heaven.
But neither could the minister.
Thy kingdom come.
Evangelical Lutherans, which this boy's family was, do not have any history of dealing with possession and exorcism at all. But he knew that Catholics do.
The minister's advice: find a Catholic priest.
If we accept the case at face value, as it's often presented, then it seems to include lots and lots of elements which characterize possession cases.
Do you think it could be?
We'll begin the prayers tomorrow night and see what happens.
Thank you,
The next day, Father Bowden returned to Richard's home. This time he brought a witness, the priest who was contacted by the family. Father Raymond Bishop.
Hello, Richard.
Hello, Father.
I'm Father Bowden. How do you do? This is Father Bishop. How are you feeling?
I'm okay.
Good. Now, if you don't mind, I'd like to recite for you what is called a novena.
Okay.
So we start like this. Most amiable and most loving Saint Francis Xavier, in union with thee, I reverently...
Oh.
What is it?
Oh. Oh, my chest.
Oh, my goodness. Victor, do you want this to stop? I implore thee to obtain for me the greatest blessing of all, that of living and dying in a state of grace.
The prayers continued from midnight until dawn, when Richard fell into a fitful sleep. The exhausted priests returned to their rectory. The next day, Bowden made a daunting and ominous decision. The boy was possessed by the devil. The parish priest must do battle with the prince of evil. He must become an exorcist. Father William Bowden was about to become the key figure in the real-life drama that inspired The Exorcist. As a war veteran, he had seen death and destruction, but nothing prepared him for the thrashing, cursing boy who seemed to have the mark of the devil on him.
He went to see the Archbishop in St. Louis to get permission to use the prayers of exorcism. But you have to do that. You can't just go out and exorcise someone.
The Archbishop made one demand.
He told him that he wanted a day-by-day account of everything that took place, and all the things that he did.
Father Bowden appointed Father Bishop as his assistant. He would keep a day-by-day journal of the events to come. Bowden now had to learn the steps of this strange and seldom used rite. He consulted the Rituali Romanum, a 400-year-old Latin book of the rituals of the Catholic Church. Deep in its pages, he found the section describing how to perform an exorcism.
The signs of possession are the following. Ability to speak with some facility in a strange tongue. The faculty of divulging future or secret events. Display of powers beyond the subject's age.
For Bowden, this was uncharted territory. Exorcisms were almost unheard of in the American Catholic Church in the 20th century. Disturbing videos made in France in the 1990s claim to document a series of exorcisms by members of an obscure religious sect that broke away from the Catholic Church. Were the sufferers possessed or simply mad? In Catholic Spain, the Church still occasionally permits exorcisms. Among the exorcists is Father José Fortea, a parish priest.
Demonic possession is a very, very unusual phenomenon. You can see thousands and thousands of people with psychiatric problems, and only one case in thousands is related to demonic influence.
In St. Louis, Father Bowden believed his case was real. He armed himself for the struggle, following the strictures of the Rituali Romanum.
Let the priest pronounce the exorcisms in a commanding voice. He ought to have a crucifix at hand. If he notices that the person is experiencing disturbance in some part of his body, he traces the sign of the cross over that place and sprinkles it with holy water, which he must have at hand for this purpose.
Bowden and Bishop returned to Richard's room, ready to do battle with the devil.
Deus nomina tue salvame. Let me go. Et virtute tue judica me.
From Father Bishop's journal, his blows were beyond the ordinary strength of the boy.
Get away from me.
Deus et Pater Domini nostri Jesu Christe. Invoco nomen sanctum tuum et clementium.
Prayers continued hour after hour. Then, just before 1 a.m.,
Open the window.
he seemed about to vomit.
Keep going.
Who's going?
Keep going.
Who's going? What's happening?
There you go.
From the journal, in a moment, he was normal. The whole family knelt around the bed and said prayers of thanksgiving. For Father Bowden, it looked like a triumph of good over evil. But from the Rituali Romanum, a warning.
Sometimes the devil will leave the possessed person in peace to make it appear that he's departed. The exorcist must be on his guard lest he fall into this trap.
Mom. Mom. Mom.
What is it, honey?
He's coming back.
Who's coming?
He's coming back.
At 3:15 a.m., Bowden was called back to Richard's bedside. his fight with the devil was far from over. Sunday, March 20th, from the Journal. Richard went into his tantrum at 8:15 p.m. with more violence than on any previous occasion. It looked like the work of the devil, but on a purely medical level, there could be another explanation.
The one thing that Richard might have had, besides being a prankster, the one medical condition he could have been temporal lobe seizure.
It's a form of epilepsy, chronic seizures caused by malfunctions in the brain's electrical activity.
Patients with temporal lobe seizure can experience hallucinations and delusions. They can experience hyper-religious thought and hyper-philosophical thought. And in rare instances, they can act out in a violent manner.
But do disease and the devil sometimes go hand in hand? Father Fortea, the Spanish exorcist, believes it is possible to be afflicted by seizures and possessed by demons at the same time. He has a warning for unbelievers.
I can say to the people that they are not sure about the existence of God, that if they will see the eyes of a possessed person and they will see what is to have the eternity before you, the whole eternity, centuries and centuries, thousands of years and thousands of years before you, and no salvation.
Novelist William Peter Blatty is also a believer.
Once I was convinced the phenomenon was real, that's what gave me an almost fervor of dedication in making it real for the reader, so that they could share the conviction that I had.
The family could no longer deal with the ongoing nightmare. Father Bowden took a drastic step advised in the Rituale Romanum.
If it can be done so conveniently, the possessed person should be led to some worthy place where the exorcism will be held away from the crowd.
That worthy place was a Catholic hospital in St. Louis, run by the Alexian Brothers, an order of monks.
Good morning, Father Bowden.
Oh, yes, Father, we're expecting you. Just down this corridor to the left, room 26.
Thank you.
He was taken to a special wing, one with locks on the doors and steel mesh on the windows. Richard became the newest patient in the psychiatric ward. It was as if the devil was dragging him down into madness.
With the temperature drop and everyone seems to be getting... Good evening, Father.
Good evening, Father.
March the 22nd, 1949. Father Bowden called up reinforcements in his battle with the devil. Walter Halloran, now retired in Wisconsin, is the only surviving eyewitness. In 1949, he was a young seminarian. His job, restrain Richard during the exorcism.
I'm okay.
Basically, all the way through the case, that was about what I did, was hold him. And then sometime, you know, when they'd stop the prayers, I'd visit with him and talk to him.
Hey, Father. Hi. Got some water? Yes. Thanks.
Before we started the prayers, he had a bottle of holy water that was about this big, and he blessed the boy with the holy water, and then he turned around and put it on a dresser. And then I was kneeling there at the foot of the bed, and all of a sudden this bottle whizzed by my head and crashed into the wall, fell down. And that was the first clue that I had that this was a case of exorcism. There really wasn't any explanation. It just happened, you know. And, well, I attributed it to the evil spirit. But there wasn't anyone within 5 feet of the bottle.
Going to die in 1957. Just saw you in hell.
Cronium Justus Dominus.
Fat ass, you ox. Big tit.
Richard, or the evil spirit in him, cursed at the priests. The journal described it as vile and filthy talk about genitals and masturbation. In 1949 it was shocking, but was it demonic possession or plain mischief?
For Richard to bring up these topics during his possession is just another great way of him sticking his finger in the eye of all those around him. When else can you swear and curse people out without getting in trouble for it by saying that the devil made me do it?
As the ordeal progressed, Richard became more and more obscene.
Stick it up, yeah.
He asked if I ever thought that the child was faking his condition or his actions. No, I never did. There wasn't anything that he was doing at the time these seizures would take place that would indicate that he was attracting attention or reveling in the attention that he had attracted.
The instructions in the old Rituale Romanum raised other doubts in Father Bowden's mind.
You know, there's a number of demands or descriptions of what the exorcist should be like.
The priest must be distinguished for his piety, prudence, and integrity.
Bowden wondered if he had the moral strength to defeat Satan. Father Fortea, the Spanish exorcist, said he knows what Bowden must have been going through.
I suppose that Father Bowden, at the first time, he was with fear, because when you do an exorcism for the first time, you have the fear that something can happen that you cannot expect. Anything can happen.
From the journal, he fought and kicked and spit so that 3 men could scarcely hold him.
He was complaining that I was hurting him by holding his arms and that sort of thing. So I let go of his arms, and the minute I did that, he whacked me.
Father, you all right? Please, Richard.
What happened? It was nothing. I hurt myself.
Richard seemed oblivious. For the family, the ordeal was excruciating. For the priests, exhausting. Bowden spent his days going about his pastoral duties, saying nothing about the bizarre nightly ritual.
I ask for forgiveness from God and from you. What are your sins?
It wore him out physically. He was always worried that there's something more that he should be doing. So I think psychologically it was a drain on him too.
Principio tibi, gees, spiritus mundi, et omnibus socialis tuis hoc de famulo, occidentibus, ut per mysteria incarnationis Passiones.
From the journal. There were 4 or 5 such urinations during the evening.
Sometimes we'd seem to be making progress, and then other times it was kind of depressing. We obviously weren't making any progress.
How are you doing, honey?
Richard's mother considered calling off the exorcism and taking Richard home.
You'll be coming home soon, sweetheart, I promise.
Yes, Mom.
Father Bowden grew weak from fatigue and hunger.
Let him avail himself above all of prayer and fasting for employing the divine assistance in expelling demons.
I know that he fasted all the time and said a lot of prayers. And he says, that's all we can do.
As the bizarre ritual continued, a pattern seemed to emerge. Richard's thrashings became more violent every time Bowden invoked the name of God.
Experience. Domini exaudi. Applicata vidi votum. Et omnibus sis tuis of sentibus.
From the journal, Richard called for a pencil. What he wrote was, I am the devil himself. In 10 days, I will give a sign. What sign? Bowden did not know, and was not going to ask. The Rituale Romanum contains a strict rule. Never engage in conversation with Satan.
You don't start asking questions like, why are you tormenting this child or anything like that. You stick to the recitation of the prayers.
Bowden made a decisive move.
Richard, have you ever been baptized?
I can't remember.
Would you like to be baptized again?
Yes, Father.
Baptism. It's the first sacrament of Christianity, and is itself a form of exorcism. It is usually a joyous occasion. Richard's baptism would be a nightmare. Father Bowden, the exorcist, decided to bring out what he considered his most powerful weapon: baptism.
Dost thou renounce?
Bowden asked the question again and again.
Dost thou renounce Satan? Dost thou renounce Satan?
I do renounce.
Richard, ego te baptizo in nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Richard, I baptize thee in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost.
In the eyes of the Catholic Church, Richard was now safe in the presence of the Holy Spirit. But it seemed that the devil wasn't finished. From the journal, The usual spitting, gyrating, cursing and physical violence continued until 11:30 p.m.
Omni incursio adversari, omni phantasma, omni...
Spanish exorcist Jose Fortea knows all too well what Father Bowden was going through. Fortea has been trying for 2 years to drive the devil out of a young woman. He says the woman had a relationship with a man who belonged to a satanic cult.
He wanted her. More than love is sex. And he's completely obsessed with that lady. And they invoke every week to the demons.
He says it has turned into a spiritual tug of war.
We cast out some demons and they invoke some demons to come in.
The Spanish exorcist sees a striking parallel with the 1949 case. Both involved summoning godless spirits.
Spirits moving. Like this?
I have read that there was a person of the family that did Ouija board. It is very, very dangerous to do Ouija board, as any kind of witchcraft, of spiritism, of invocation of unknown spirits.
If my soul or my consciousness is separable from my body, then this raises the possibility that something else could get in here and take control. So hence the idea of possession. And so, if you like, it's the dark side of belief in the afterlife, which in itself is generally, I think, a positive belief. Whether or not it's something that is true is a very positive thing to believe, because it helps us to cope with our anxieties about our own mortality.
After Richard's baptism, a period of calm days, with Richard helping out around the hospital.
Sitting here reading by yourself. Well, you know what?
But the nights with the praying priests were another matter.
It was strange, things that he would do, like he would spit at you, but his eyes would be closed, and then he swung at me and his eyes were closed, but he always had direct hits.
Father Bowden and his assistants arrived at the hospital at 8 p.m, weary but determined to press on with the exorcism ritual.
Hello, Richard.
Hello, Father.
How are you feeling?
I'm fine.
A rosary? Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Richard, what is it?
Gouged into his chest in capital letters, the word exit.
Omni incursio adversari.
From the journal, the devil laughed and said, he has to say one more word. He'll never say it.
You only have to say one more word, but you never say it.
We were puzzling, trying to figure out what that could possibly be. And finally figured out that the word was Lord.
The priests invoked the Lord's name again and again, Richard becoming more and more agitated, even delirious. The journal stated that Richard saw a vision of St. Michael the Archangel.
It burns.
Through Richard, the angel's voice broke into the prayers.
Satan, it's St. Michael, and I demand you, Satan, and the other evil spirits to leave the body. In the name of Dominus, immediately, now, now, now!
Richard later described seeing the devil wrestling an angel at the mouth of a fiery cave. The angel prevailed, and the devil retreated into the flames.
He's gone.
Richard received communion from Father Bowden. Soon after, a powerful blast was heard throughout the hospital. No one felt shockwaves, and there was no sign of an explosion.
And the people across the street in the church heard it, and then all the lights went out, and then they came back on, and Richard sat up and he said, "He's gone."
Bowden took the strange phenomenon as a sign that the devil had finally left Richard's body. After 4 continuous weeks of exorcism, Richard went home. Was it real? Or was Richard delusional? Perhaps it was all a prank.
The boy at the centre of the case, realising perhaps how easy it would be to fool all concerned, actually brought about most of the phenomena deliberately. I suspect at the end of the day we've got one of the cases that seems to have gone down in history as being a classic case of possession and exorcism, but when you look more closely at the case, it appears it's built on very, very flimsy evidence indeed.
Richard's month-long ordeal ended on April the 29th, 1949.
8. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Back home, his parents watched for signs of demonic possession. There were none. Richard behaved like a normal boy. The devil, it seemed, had returned to hell. Father Bowden returned to his pastoral duties and did not discuss the exorcism. Years later, author William Peter Blatty, preparing to write his book, The Exorcist, corresponded with Father Bowden. The priest refused to meet him in person.
He said, "The only thing I can tell you is that the case that I was involved in was the real thing. I had no doubt about it then. I have no doubt about it now."
I'm convinced that the situation of Richard and the things that he went through was all genuine. There wasn't any deception on his part.
But others suggest Richard created the fantasy of a demonic possession. A fantasy fueled by his family with its belief in spiritualism, and the priests with their rites of exorcism.
It's quite possible in these cases the priests themselves don't realise how influential their own behaviour is in shaping what's actually going on. They may well be influential in terms of giving out, unintentionally, but giving out cues as to what is the appropriate behaviour. They'll carry on trying until the appropriate behaviour is manifest, and then they'll move on to the next phase. And in that way, they will be receiving confirmation that there is some kind of an underlying pattern there without realising their own role in actually bringing that about.
But what about the journal and its meticulous reports of shaking beds and flying objects?
We know from mountains of research on the reliability of eyewitness testimony that, in general, eyewitness testimony is not that accurate. Nobody's engaged in any deliberate attempt at deception. People are being sincere, they're giving genuine, honest accounts of what they think they saw.
The messages on Richard's skin, were they the work of the devil or self-inflicted?
Writing on the skin is called dermatographia, and it supposedly can occur in heightened states of anxiety. So just moving their fingernail across their own skin, or any object, a pen, a thorn, it will make a welt raise up, and it looks like a kind of a bas-relief form of writing on the skin.
Could he have been simply seeking attention?
I believe that the entire situation started off probably as innocent pranks of a 14-year-old, but then when the Catholic Church and the priests got involved, he thought he had to run with this story.
the really probing question is not whether or not this 1949 case was the real thing. I don't know. Of course I don't know. The question, though, is, could it have been the real thing? Isn't that interesting?
Word of the exorcism soon leaked out, leading to newspaper stories and, for the priests, unwanted public attention.
After it was over, I got a lot of crazy phone calls. A woman wanted her husband exorcised, and someone wanted their dog exorcised, and, a lot of crazy stuff.
Christmas 1973. The Exorcist was released, and one Catholic church in Washington received 40 requests for exorcisms. In St. Louis, Walter Halloran and William Bowden attended a matinee. Bowden was shocked.
Something would happen in the movie, and he'd say, Walt, he says, that's not true. That didn't take place at all. And he'd be banging him by the arm. And Bill, I says, you got to be quiet. They're going to throw us out of here.
Richard, the boy who started it all, converted to the Catholic Church, grew up to become a scientist, and now lives in the eastern United States. He is said to have no recollection of the events of 1949. Father Bowden died in St. Louis in 1983 at the age of 86. He never spoke publicly about the exorcism. Halloran served as an army chaplain in Vietnam, then taught at university until his retirement.
I'm not really an expert in the field. And I just looked at it. This is the situation that's confronting us, and we're using prayer to alleviate it, and it worked.
In 1999, 385 years after the Rituale Romanum was written, the Vatican issued revisions, cautioning priests to ensure that they are not dealing with physical or mental illness. The Vatican also issued a statement giving the devil his due. Anyone who says he doesn't exist would not have the fullness of the Catholic faith.
If you believe in the devil and you see the devil, therefore there must be a God, or we're all in trouble.